Welcome to Keep Going, a podcast about failure and success, hosted by John Biggs. Every week, we talk to an amazing person about a time they failed and what they learned. And remember, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Welcome back to Keep Going, a podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show, I have Dr. Danny Penman. He's a mindfulness teacher and the author of Deeper Mindfulness, which is a brand new book about surviving in a chaotic world. Welcome, Danny.
Hello. Glad to be on your program.
Yeah, this is wonderful. So usually it's an entrepreneur that I bring on here, somebody who's I guess, built software. I suppose you're building software for the brain, it seems like. So this might be a nice fit, but I really wanted you on here to talk about mindfulness because I think that's one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs are facing is essentially dealing with the chaos of building, dealing with the chaos and fear and anxiety associated with entrepreneurship. So why don't we go into your story here?
Yes. Our original book actually arose out of failure. The original book, Mindfulness, Finding Peace in a Frantic World, grew out of, two things. One was Mark Williams's academic work, but also I had a terrible flying accident. Mm-hmm. And it was my triumph over that laid the groundwork for the first book. But anyway, the rather gruesome story.
Can you tell us a little bit? Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. I used to be a very keen paraglider pilot, and it was the absolute center of my life. And if it was a good day for flying, you'd find me flying somewhere over southern England. And then one day, I was soaring along a range of hills in 80 miles west of London called the Cotswolds. Perfect day until there was a sudden downdraft of air, and my canopy flapped, and I plunged headlong into the hillside below. I was about 80 feet up at the time, so this was going to be a grim accident. I managed to reinflate the canopy, then it collapsed again, and I fell about 30 feet into the hillside. Now, luckily, I landed on my feet, but unluckily, the lower half of my right leg was driven through the knee and into my thigh. So this was a truly accident. So I was lying there on the hillside, racked with pain, and I remembered a form of meditation I had learned in school when I was about 16 or 17 years old. And in sheer desperation, I decided to use the meditation to try and control the pain. So I could do really basic things like phone for an ambulance and just it's a very simple breathing meditation. So began to focus on my breathing, gradually managed to get things under control just by focusing on the way the air flowed into my lungs and out. And the pain didn't go away completely. It was still there, but it meant I could, it was almost like I was looking through a window at the pain. So it was still there. I couldn't get rid of it, but it allowed me to get things under control. And then after a while, half an hour, I was taken to hospital, and I spent a month in hospital, during which I had what's known as a talar spatial frame fitted to my leg. And this consisted of 4 titanium rings around the outside of my leg, and 16 wires and bolts went through one side of the leg, through a fragment of bone, and out the other side. Mm-hmm. And this allowed the surgeon to move all the bits of bone around inside my leg and knee. And as you can imagine, I was in an awful lot of pain continuously. I was on extremely strong morphine derived painkillers, not the kind of things you want to be taking unless you absolutely have to. And I was also extremely anxious and stressed and not a little unhappy as well. So I carried on using this very simple meditation just to, control the pain. And this allowed me to reduce my painkiller intake by about 3/4, 2/3, something like that. So it was having a very profound effect on the pain. I was also, I was an awful lot less anxious and stressed, and I noticed something very strange happening as well, because my healing rate increased. The surgeon reckoned that I would probably have this frantic to 24 months. And in the event, it was actually removed after 5 or 5.5 months. So, something profound was happening to my body here. I was becoming a lot happier, a lot less anxious and stressed, and my body was healing a lot sooner. So out of this tragic situation, I was learning something really, really important here. And quite by chance, I had a lot of time in which to kind of research what I was doing. So quite by chance, I came across a very small article in the Financial Times magazine. And it was about some academic work that had been done about the use of meditation to control chronic depression. And it's about the academic work of Professor Mark Williams at Oxford University. And it's really interesting because I've been using one of these techniques, there's this very simple breathing meditation. So I got hold of Mark's academic work, got hold of one of his academic books. I thought, my God, this is what I have been doing, and found it extremely useful, became fascinated by this work and contacted Mark. And eventually I managed to get an article into a national newspaper in the UK. But it took so much effort because this is 15 years ago now, 15 years ago, nobody was interested in mindfulness. Nobody even heard mindfulness. No. And so it's like really pushing against the entire system. It was seen, mindfulness meditation, it was seen as akin to waving crystals around, or homeopathy, Everybody thought it's just a bit weird, not going to work. But it turned out Mark had turned it into a therapy that had just been recognised by our health system, a National Health Service, and it was actually being rolled out very slowly. But, certain centres, they found it was highly, highly effective. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy turned out to be at least as good as medicine or therapy for the worst forms of depression, and great for anxiety and stress too, and enhancing creativity and all those, the things we want in our life, get rid of the things we don't want, anxiety, stress, depression, and get more of the things we want, like clear thinking, logical thinking, and creativity. So eventually I got this into a newspaper, and I thought, what? The world really needs to know about this. I persuaded Mark to work on a popular book about his work. So the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy course is 8 weeks, and you need to spend about 45 minutes a day. And I thought, with the best will in the world, most people will never meditate for 45 minutes a day. Sure. I put it to Mark, can we compress this down? Can we take your course, shrink it down to 10 to 20 minutes a day? And he said, well, it's possible. Let's have a go. Let's see what we can do. We eventually produced Mindfulness, Finding Peace in a Frantic World. Numerous clinical trials have now shown that it is highly effective in its own right for anxiety, stress, and depression. The book has now gone on to sell 2 million copies. I originally thought, if we do really well, we'll sell 5,000 copies. Deep down in my heart, of course, I wanted it to become a raging success. I did my absolute level best, along with Mark, to produce a book that everybody could use and everybody would love. But, any of your listeners, entrepreneurs, know you do your best and you hope for the best, but a lot of the time you fail and you learn from those failures, And that was my approach to this. And genuinely, much to my surprise, it went on to become a great publishing success.
So is there a I guess a shortcut that you can offer that before people buy the book? What should people be doing, especially if you're under massive amounts of stress all the time?
Okay, the first thing is try not to go on a retreat for 8 weeks.
Okay.
Try not to spend 45 minutes a day meditating. Start off with little teeny tiny baby steps, I imagine many of the people who listen to your program, they are incredibly driven. If they come across an idea and they want to make it a success, they all want to throw themselves, mind, body, and spirit into that. And you know what? When it comes to mindfulness, baby steps are the best. Because if you try and do it from a standing start for 45 minutes a day, it's difficult, Best thing to do is, just dip your toe in the water and begin. A great place to begin is to go to our website, franticworld.com. There are lots of meditations that you can download from a book for free. Some of them are only 8 or 10 minutes. And that's a great place to start, Just go there, franticworld.com, and with a good look around and download or stream some of the meditations. A great one to start with, a very simple breathing meditation, or you can try the chocolate meditation,
All right, so we'll send people over there.
Yep.
What happens when you get someone who is a little bit skeptical of the whole thing? I'm fairly certain that the entrepreneurial class is fairly open to mindfulness, but how do you convince a CEO who's all science and sees that, again, as like quick crystal waving?
Yeah. Just look at the evidence. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Just simply go and look at the evidence. And the evidence from hundreds, quite possibly thousands of clinical trials are very clear. Mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy in particular is highly effective for relieving anxiety, stress, and depression. And the great thing is, the worse the depression, the more effective it is. Now, that's really weird that that's the case, Normally with these things, there's, a graduation. They highly, like antidepressants, are very effective for the milder forms of depression. And the worse it gets, the more difficult it is for those antidepressants to gain traction. But actually, it's the opposite with mindfulness, which is good. And, overall, it's about 50% effective, which is about the same as medicines and about the same as therapy as well. So, the advantage really of mindfulness is you can do it all of your life. You don't feel, doctors may prescribe antidepressants for, say, 6 months or a year, and then you're back with your same problems. And eventually there's a realistic prospect of the depression returning. Whereas with mindfulness, the idea is you just meditate for 10 or 20 minutes a day, and, the relief will be a far longer term.
And is it, you're basically doing it daily since your accident, right?
Yes, I generally do 10, 20 minutes a day, 5, 6 days a week, something like that. I have used it really since I was about 15 or 16. But what tended to happen is the way most people use meditation, which is times of acute stress, acute unhappiness. They suddenly remember, oh, yeah, I used to meditate. That helped. You do the meditation for a few weeks or a month or two, and then life will get back to normal, and you just stop.
How do you make time for meditation?
You have to, really. It's as simple as that. your mind will come up with endless reasons why you shouldn't meditate in this particular moment. And the only solution really is to just do it. Set aside 10 minutes a day in a natural gap in the day and just begin.
Do you recall speaking to any like hard charging CEOs who this has helped?
Yeah, I've given a number of seminars for usually financiers in the city of London, which is obviously a huge financial centre. And, a lot of them, they just turned up and kind of burned out, really, late 30s, early 40s. They'd spent 15 years, maybe sometimes longer, just doing those ferociously long days those people always seem to do, 12, 14, 15-hour days, 6 days a week, few holidays. And you know what? It's a great way of building a career for a few years, but after, say, 10 years, the energy just goes, the enthusiasm goes, but you still got that drive to succeed, but you no longer have the mental or physical capacity to do so. Eventually you burn out. And it's only really when you get to that point that you suddenly realize you've got to take charge of your life. And the most important thing to remember is, when you're approaching that point, that's the time to step off the elevator and start the process of changing your life. It doesn't mean you have to give up your career or give up a desire to achieve outsized gains. But you need to learn, you're going to be more strategic. Youthful enthusiasm, youthful energy is brilliant. But you get to a point in life where you have to start using your remaining energy thoughtfully. And that's the point where mindfulness is going to be really, really useful.
Okay. How do you know when that time has come? How do you, what happens in you? A lot of people are fairly oblivious to even the most powerful cues internally.
Now, that is true. Ideally, you'd actually begin a long time before. There's a lot of evidence, really, that mindfulness in general is good for enhancing creativity and logical thinking and decision-making. So hopefully the people listening to your program will go away, look at the evidence, and build mindfulness into their life before it becomes a problem. You can wait for your first heart attack. You can wait until you find yourself chronically stressed or depressed and are prescribed medicine. But it's best to begin before then, I think.
Wonderful. All right. So your brand new book is Deeper Mindfulness. That's out now. Is that the one to buy, or should we go for the 8-week program? What's the one to look at?
The new one, Deeper Mindfulness, is more of it's a development of the original.
Uh-huh.
It's strictly speaking, it's not a sequel. But when we wrote the original book, there's been 15 years of neuroscience since then, really. But what's really interesting is the way the neuroscience chimes with some very ancient meditations called feeling tone meditations. Now, on the surface, these are mindfulness meditations that are quite similar to the ones in our first book, but what they help you do, they're actually far more powerful in the long run. But what they help you to do is to tune into the moment that the unconscious mind crystallizes into consciousness. And that is of profound importance because it allows you to take control of your thoughts and feelings and emotions before they've run away with you. Now, traditional mindfulness courses and like the program in our book, for example, share many commonalities with cognitive behavior therapy. That they teach you to begin to see your thoughts and emotions, and they teach you to see there's kind of quite early stages where your thoughts and your feelings and emotions are building momentum and going off in distressing directions. That's the aim of CBT. It's also the aim of mindfulness. It's a process known as metacognition. So you learn to decenter, step back from your thoughts and your feelings and emotions. Very, very effective. But wouldn't it be great if you go a little bit further upstream to just before the thoughts and feelings and emotions appeared in your mind? Well, that's what the program in our new book does, because there's this moment where, the unconscious mind crystallizes into the conscious mind, and then there's this very brief moment, very brief pause where you categorize what's going on in your mind and body very, very simply as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Now, that very simple, it's called a feeling tone. It's very brief, but it's one of the most important moments in your life. Even though they appear every few seconds, they're one of the most important moments in your life, each one of them, because it's like a tipping point. It colors your whole background of how you make sense of the world. So if an unpleasant feeling tone appears, then it's more likely that it's going to set off a chain of kind of negative thoughts and feelings and emotions. If a positive or pleasant feeling tone appears, it's more likely you're going to have actually, if you can see that process as it begins to happen, where you can actually make allowances for, negativity, distressing thoughts and feelings, so you can take effective action. And that can give you an awful lot more control over your life.
Interesting. That'd be super helpful in, everyday building, right? If you find yourself in a position where you're going to start yelling at your underlings or whatever, you might want to take a minute.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But to me, what's most interesting about all of this is these meditations are 2,500 years old, and yet they chime so wonderfully with a lot of the up-to-date neuroscience, because we make sense of the world in a radically different way to what people expect. The traditional view is we have data streaming from our senses, if we're looking at a scene, looking at a park or a car or whatever, we see the outline of, say, a car, an automobile rather, and, its color and its shape and all the rest of it. And we recognize it as an automobile. Now, that's actually not how the way the mind works. What we have is an internal model. And so when we look at something, the data coming from our senses just checks how accurate the model is. And it's as simple as that. We experience, it's almost like a virtual reality in our mind. And the data coming from our senses just checks how accurate it is. And it's as simple as that. And that allows us to, allows the brain to function a lot quicker. It consumes far fewer resources. And that's why nature's given us a brain that works in that way. Now,
interesting.
Yeah. Now, on a practical level, what happens is we have this virtual reality in our mind. If we're not paying attention to the data coming from our senses, our model can just gradually drift away from reality. It's only very small, slow steps, but over days, weeks, months, and years, our model becomes increasingly disconnected from reality. And that is almost certainly the root cause of an awful lot of mental distress and quite possibly mental ill health as well, because we've lost contact with the real world. So in practice, if you consciously, repeatedly make contact with the data coming in from your senses, you can progressively recalibrate the model, recalibrate the virtual reality in your mind, and you can have an increasingly accurate picture of the world. which means you're less likely to spend a lot of time having anxious, stress, depressing thoughts, Of course, you're going to have those from time to time, but equally, the world can be a distressing place sometimes. A lot of the time, it's a wonderful place, but we don't notice the wonderful things. We only notice the distressing things. But if you recalibrate your mind to notice everything, life becomes progressively better.
Wonderful. I think we should probably stop there. I think that's quite a beautiful concept. franticworld.com is the site to find out about the books. Danny Penman and Mark Williams, Dr. Mark Williams from Oxford, wrote these books. Thank you, Danny, for joining us today. This has been really enlightening.
Good. Yes, I'm glad. It's just great to talk to people who are interested in these ideas and can share those ideas with the world.
Yeah.
Because I just think they're so profoundly important. There's so much clinical evidence that these techniques can radically improve your life.
Yeah. This has been Keep Going, podcast about success and failure. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next week.